Oh, welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA Podcast, episode 77. Your host, Noah B. and Dominic Salee. It's Wednesday, which means this episode is just a bit extra special, and here's why. Third part in an ongoing series that we like to call The State of.
And we love it, don't we?
We do. Basically, the whole concept here being that we take anything, whether it be a division, a fighter, a promotion, anything that literally affects MMA as a whole, we give the state of. So what led up to the current state we're in and how we foresee the future playing out.
Well said.
How are you doing, Dominic?
I'm doing well, and I'm just glad we're back on another hump day here. Mm-hmm. It's always nice with the schedule we have when we finally come back, bringing the momentum, and we're ready to go with another instant classic here.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously.
Of course. So this third part, first two, we did the state of the men's UFC men's flyweight division. Then we did the state of Conor McGregor. Mm-hmm. And now we're back with another division, this time the state of the UFC Light Heavyweight division. Pretty much in the news right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, Saturday, our main event was Jan Bolhovich, the light heavyweight champion, defending his belt against the middleweight champion Israel Adesanya. And really is kind of coming to his own here. A guy who people have counted out every step in the way. I can say that because I did. And now he's a defending champion, reigning defending.
Yes.
So, but in order to kind of,
get to where we are.
To get to where we are, we got to go back.
Dare I say, we must paint the picture.
Yes, we must. We're going to go back to 1997.
1997.
So, in the early days of the UFC, obviously, for the first couple of years, it was all strictly tournament, one-night tournaments, and the winner would get, some sort of, I don't know, you'd get like a big old check. Maybe.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah,
like the big
checks. Maybe a trophy. I don't know. They did introduce something called a super fight champion. So they were still doing open weight. There wasn't like weight classes, but a lot of these tournaments, what was happening was the fights that they wanted to make in the finals weren't happening. So what do? Take those guys out of the tournaments and put them up against each other in the main event. So you started with Royce Gracie, Ken Shamrock, and then Ken Shamrock was in a lot of them. He did one with Dan Severn. I think he did one with Chemo, Leopoldo, someone. I think he did one with. There's a lot of them. Let's put it that way. But they officially introduced a title for the heavyweight division, which started with Mark Coleman. Mm-hmm. And that was their only champion for about, I want to say 2 years, a year. But at UFC Japan, in Yokohama, Japan, on December 21st, 1997, the UFC would crown its first light heavyweight champion. And that was Mr. Frank Shamrock with his victory over Kevin Jackson.
Little did they know that would become essentially the staple division of the entire organization for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, do you feel like, maybe this is something for later, but do you feel like this division overall is the one that's had the largest impact on the organization?
Gotta be, 100%. And, of course, we'll get into that much more. We're still in the early days.
Yeah, so Frank Shamrock gets the win there at UFC Japan, 1997. He would go on to defend the belt 4 times.
That's solid numbers.
Yep, he defended over Igor Zinovev at UFC 16, Jeremy Horn at UFC 17. Jeremy Horn having a victory over Chuck Liddell.
Yep.
John Lober at UFC Brazil. And capped it off with the win over Tito Ortiz at UFC 22. He held the belt for 703 days.
Wow. Not bad for your first champion.
A little less than 2 years.
Yeah.
He would vacate the belt on November 24th, 1999, a day before my birthday, a day before I turned 2 years old. And he basically retired.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought he did.
Citing a lack of competition. Now, he would come back. He would have bouts in Strikeforce, I believe, and maybe even WEC, but Yeah, that was kind of the UFC's first dominant champion. The heavyweight division really has never had,
Yeah, that's true.
up until, I guess, Stipe, has never really had a dominant champion, at least if you're going by
The
title
defenses.
wins. Yeah. But Frank Shamrock, you would think, being how dominant he was for the early days, you would think that he would be a UFC Hall of Famer, right? Well, he is not. For as open as Dana White is, and as much as he likes to, he'll keep it real.
He'll speak his mind, yeah.
He's never really addressed it. All we know is that him and Frank Shamrock do not like each other to this day, and therefore Frank Shamrock has not, may never be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame.
How about that? First ever light heavyweight champion.
Yep, and he's still not even there.
That's tough.
Come on, he needs to be put in there.
Let's do it.
But with that being said, he vacates in 1999. UFC crowns its second ever champion. A man pretty familiar. Tito Ortiz.
Mm-hmm.
So he would win the belt at UFC 25 in Tokyo, Japan, with a victory over Vanderlei Silva.
How about it?
A lot of people may not realize that Vanderlei Silva fought in the UFC before we kind of knew him.
Before he became the
really before he
we
made
all know.
himself who he was in Pride even. But Tito would pretty much dominate him, a very young Vanderlei Silva. That was on April 14th, 2000.
2000.
He would go on to hold the belt for 1,260 days.
That's a title reign right there.
He would defend the belt, make it 5 times.
5 times.
He would defeat Yuki Kondo at UFC 29, Evan Tanner at UFC 30, Elvis Sinisic at UFC 32, Vladimir Matyushenko at UFC 33, and Ken Shamrock at UFC 40.
One of the best rivalries in UFC history.
Literally a rivalry that, in some ways, kind of carried the promotion in those early days.
So when did his title reign end?
Well, it would end, I guess, June 6, 2003.
So from 97 to 03, we had 2 champs. It's almost like this division just has those periods, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's something else we'll get into.
It's about to change, though.
Yeah,
here
exactly.
pretty quick.
It's crazy.
Because Tito Ortiz would end up losing him. And I guess we should just talk about Tito Ortiz for a second. I mean, the guy was...
He's on your Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, he was on my Mount Rushmore. I think he's kind of... Due to kind of maybe some of his trash talk being a little cringe nowadays, and he's said some out there things. He's kind of become a meme, in a lot of ways. However, the guy was truly dominant at the time.
You can't deny what he did for the company.
And he was ahead of his time when it came to MMA and fight promotion as a whole. The first time the UFC was really featured in a prominent spotlight on TV was on the Best Damn Sports Show, I think is what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And they featured Tito Ortiz. He talked on there. He talked a lot of shit about Ken Shamrock, I believe. And that was kind of way ahead of its time.
He was kind of their first big draw.
He was their first star for sure. And I just don't think he gets enough credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
He was really building to be, just one of the most prominent guys going forward. However, once sort of Chuck Liddell came into the picture, the Fertittas and Dana White, they all wanted Chuck Liddell a little more. So that's why there's a lot of bad blood there between Tito and Dana White.
And for those that haven't seen the Chuck and Tito 30 for 30, wow.
Yeah, I would recommend to watch that if you want more details. But, however, Chuck Liddell would not be the one to take the belt from him.
Dethrone Tito.
Yeah. So, sorry, I misspoke. Tito lost the belt on September 26, 2003.
Okay.
However, on June 6, 2003, Randy Couture would beat Chuck Liddell for the interim title. One of the first examples of an interim title in the UFC, maybe the first. That was at UFC 43. Tito was in contract negotiations, a contract dispute. Those disputes got so bad that at one point it was agreed upon with the contract that Tito and Dana White would box on Spike TV.
Yeah, Tito once to a press conference wore a shirt that said, "Dana's my bitch."
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yes, he did. And because of that interim title put in place, Randy Couture beating Chuck Liddell, and nobody saw that coming.
Yeah.
Randy Couture at that point was already a heavyweight champion.
Nobody ever saw Randy doing anything, and he just went out and did
the guy was already one of the first heavyweight champions. He left. He comes back. Everybody's like, okay, let's get Chuck Liddell a big win. He loses. He
and
gets
did it all
dominated.
late 30s, early 40s.
Yep.
Crazy.
And then, after beating Chuck Liddell, they're like, well, he's not going to beat Tito, right? He does.
And slapped him on the ass in the process.
He did. Randy would beat Tito Ortiz at the very next event, UFC 44 in Las Vegas, Nevada, September 26, 2003. So Randy Couture ends up becoming the undisputed champion. That would not be the last time you will hear that. However, his reign would only be 127 days, and this is going to be another interesting point. He would lose the belt at UFC 46 to... You want to take a guess on who he lost the belt to?
This one had to have been Chuck, right? Mm-mm. No.
It was Vitor Belfort.
Oh,
so,
young Vitor.
However, it is the weirdest way a champion has lost his belt up until what just
happened Saturday.
With the disqualification of Peter Yan. Essentially, the fight begins. Everybody's really looking forward to it. I believe Vitor throws just a punch that grazes Couture. Immediately, Couture is like, he's trying to still fight, but his eye, you could tell he's like in so much pain. His eye like won't open, and he's just like grimacing the whole time. Doctor steps in, 54 seconds into the fight. They check the cut, or they check his eye, I should say. Apparently, the glove grazed his eye and caused a cut.
Yeah, on his eyeball.
Yep. So Vitor Belfort knew.
Wowzer.
Yeah, so definitely the weirdest way that a champion would lose his belt up until
UFC
what happens.
259.
Yeah. And Vitor would not hold it long. His reign would technically be longer at 203 days. But he would lose it back to Randy Couture at UFC 49.
So never had a technical title defense.
Nope. August 21st, 2004. And Randy Couture, two-time light heavyweight champion.
Just like that.
However, his reign also would not last very long. And this is where we're going to get into kind of
this is where it changes hands a lot.
Yeah, so like you mentioned at the beginning, you had a, 6-year period.
We started with a long law.
Had two champions in 6 years.
Yeah.
Now you're about to see some hot potato with the belt.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to last a while.
A long time. Long time.
But it starts, Randy Couture gets his belt back. All's kind of right in the world, right? It feels like everything's back to normal. Then Randy would lose the belt at UFC 52 in a rematch with Chuck Liddell.
There it is.
Yeah. Now, Chuck Liddell...
The Iceman.
The Iceman. I want to let you talk about Chuck Liddell. I know you've done
He
it
was
before,
the guy.
But you grew up. That's when you first started watching.
That is what brought me to the UFC. I remember tuning in on the Spike TV days and the old pay-per-view days, and it seemed like he was always headlining, and he had those badass shorts with the icicles hanging off, and that's why it was always cool to see him fight Tito, because Tito had the fire shorts. It was like fire and ice. Couldn't stand each other. And, like we said, Tito was the first big draw and star in the UFC. Chuck was kind of next up. Had the mohawk, the tattoo on his head, the just stand and brawl capabilities. A kickboxer, was always going to be in an exciting fight. And that's just what the UFC wanted. A guy like that to be their champion, to build upon him. And he was in so many great rivalries with Tito, with Randy Couture. And he had finally gotten to where the company envisioned him to be one day. Mm-hmm. The light heavyweight champion. Yeah,
and really Chuck, he was like, I know you were just talking about this, but he
was their face.
Yeah, he was the face of the company.
Yeah.
And and a lot of the faces of the company the UFC has had, he's really the one who I think the majority of people who don't watch MMA would look at him and go, okay, that's what I would expect. Mohawk.
Exactly. Tattoo on his head.
Yeah, tattoo on his head. Got the shorts with the ice on them.
Just always in brawl.
Big, heavy partier guy. Dude, that you looked like you just... Dude who gets in bar fights
didn't want
for
to fuck
fun.
with
Yeah,
Chuck.
you did not want to fuck with Chuck. Exactly.
Someone would down the line, but...
Yeah. However, he would defend the belt 4 times.
Yeah.
A reign that lasted only 770 days, funny
Talk
enough.
about activity.
Yeah. So
I tell
still,
you, man, he was always main eventing, though.
Still less than 2 years,
Yeah.
technically. But 4 title defenses. He would defend against Jeremy Horn at UFC 54. Randy Couture at UFC 57. So that would cap off their trilogy with
Chuck 2-1.
Chuck 2-1. Renato Sobral at UFC 62. And finally, Tito Ortiz at UFC 66. Yeah, I don't know if people realize this, but Tito and Chuck's first encounter wasn't for a belt.
Yeah.
But the rematch would be, and Chuck won both of them. So
Yep.
he kind of gets the bet. He ends up getting the edge in both of his big rivalries, and really that would kind of solidify his place.
A lot of guys can't do that, you know?
You know, that kind of, Tito's place was already kind of made for him just by the impact he had early on. But, Chuck really had to kind of earn it with these rivalries here.
Yeah.
He had to really show that he was the best.
He was it, man. He was the it factor.
He had to show that, like, the hype was warranted with
Yeah.
him, that the popularity was warranted, that he wasn't just this guy who looked like a fighter, that he was...
A mixed martial artist, you know?
And funny thing about Chuck, this is also something for the 30 for 30 if you guys want to learn more. Chuck was actually... He looked a lot like a fighter, but he grew up in a pretty... relatively normal environment. I mean, he went to college. He's got a degree in, like, mathematics or something like that. Dude's very smart. Very, articulate and everything.
Just fell in love with the fight game.
Yeah, and he was good at it.
Yeah, that's true.
He would, however, lose the belt at UFC 71 to another familiar name, Rampage Jackson.
Man, I remember the hype about Rampage
I think
when he
this
came into the UFC.
This is really the first time we've got to really talk about Rampage.
That's true, man. That's so true.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't say familiar name. Quentin Rampage Jackson, a guy who really made a name for himself at Pride FC, along with a lot of these light heavyweights.
This was one of the biggest just stars that came over to the UFC ever to this day.
A personality that was bigger than the arena.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
I mean, the guy was just...
Everybody wanted to see Rampage. Came out with the big chains on his neck. Does the big howl when they're introducing him. Just, what a star.
He would knock out Chuck.
Yes.
And that would kind of be the end of Chuck in the title picture for the most part. Chuck would kind of fall off after that.
He'd have a tough career after.
And this is what we're talking about. This is the hot potato phase of the division. Because Quentin's reign would only last... Well, funny enough, it lasted 406 days. That's longer than I thought it would have been. Only defended the belt once.
Yeah.
And that was against Dan Henderson, another guy from Pride who had really made a name for himself. That was at UFC 75. He would go on to lose the belt to... This is a name we've talked about a few times. Forrest Griffin.
Oh, man.
One of the biggest, probably, upset wins that maybe people don't... People now might not see it as an upset, but at the time, that was a huge upset.
Especially the way Rampage was.
Nobody thought Forrest Griffin could be UFC champion. And at UFC 86, he would do it.
Love that for Forrest. Now a UFC Hall of Famer. The original Ultimate Fighter Season 1 winner. And that's when, they're like, oh, we had this guy from the show. And look at this. Became the champion of the world,
Yeah. That would happen on July 5th, 2008. Forrest's reign, though, would only last 175 days because he would lose in his very next bout to Sugar Rashad Evans.
Man, and that's another guy, too, that was just looked at as such a star. He may have even been undefeated at the time or, like, one loss. Sugar Rashad was looked at as like kind of that future of MMA sort of deal, followed up by someone else we're going to speak of soon. And, man, he brought the power and he had the swag and confidence about him. And he was whooping people, man.
Rashad was undefeated at the time.
Yeah.
He was 12-0-1 going into the fight.
And that's another guy, by the way, that had been on the Ultimate Fighter and now...
He fought at light heavyweight on the Ultimate Fighter, too.
Yeah,
and he wasn't a big guy for...
fought at heavyweight.
Fought at heavyweight.
Yeah. But no, very small.
And he's not even a big guy for light heavyweight.
Yeah, he was weighing like 220.
But he won the whole season.
Yep.
And then after that win over Forrest, he was 13-0-1. He did have a draw with Tito Ortiz before that, but yeah, relatively unstoppable. Yeah. However, he also would lose in his very next bout, happening at UFC 98, May 23rd, 2009. His reign lasted 147 days. He would lose to Lyoto Machida.
Another guy in the light heavyweight division looked at as a future star. What are the infamous words of Joe Rogan?
We are now in the Machida era.
Well,
Didn't quite go that way. However, he would technically hold the belt for 350 days, and technically also as a title defense.
Yeah.
He would main event UFC 104 with Mauricio Shogun Hua, another guy with a lot. Really, all these light heavyweights, man.
This was the division.
It's very comparable to what the lightweight division is today. If you took Khabib out, with Khabib being out.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
If these guys were actually if there was actually a belt in place, I feel like a lot of these guys would just be passing it back and forth.
There was so much talent, and everybody was tuning in for this division.
Shogun Hua was kind of the last guy to really make an impact in Pride before it's closed its doors. He comes over to the UFC, had a very tough beginning to his career here. He was out of shape, might have been fighting hurt.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be, he comes to the UFC. He loses his debut fight against Forrest Griffin. About nobody thought Forrest would win. Forrest submitted him in the third round.
Well.
Then he would have a win over Mark Coleman in his next fight, but Mark Coleman was not
the Mark Coleman we all know.
No, this was a Mark Coleman who looked a lot smaller. He was a lot older, slower. It was a great fight. Very sloppy, but a fun fight. But it just didn't speak to, it didn't give you confidence that Shogun was going to be the Shogun of Pride. And then he would knock out Chuck.
Yeah.
Now, I think that win might have helped a lot of people. He knocked him out in the first round, so I think that might have helped a lot of people kind of be like, okay, maybe he can compete. Maybe he figured it out. But Chuck had already been knocked out, I think, twice before that.
Yeah.
So I think people were still questioning when he got this title shot with Lyoto Machida. However, they would have a pretty great fight, a fight that everybody thought Shogun Hua won.
Everybody.
Except the three judges who scored the fight. Because they give the nod to Lyoto Machida. And the UFC thought that was such a robbery that they immediately ran it back.
Oh, yeah.
And at UFC 113, happening May 8th, 2010, Shogun Hua wouldn't let the judges take it away from him this time. Knocks out Lyoto Machida in the first round.
Dominated.
And becomes champion of the world.
And there goes that Machida era. Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan to this day.
He still to this day is like, oh, man. One of the most bold hot takes I've ever said.
I mean, I can see why.
To his point.
When you look at some of these guys at that time, Rashad Evans is a guy, if you want to talk about him, that really injuries kind of got in the way for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he did have a ton of losses after he lost the belt, but it seemed like it was always injuries that just hindered him from really getting on any sort of run.
Yeah. Well, and, Lyoto was that guy that had brought that karate style so prominent over to the UFC that really no one had seen before. And that's why everybody was so awestruck when he would come to fight. And then just to see him win the belt, shouldn't have even had a title defense, and then gets KO'd brutally to lose the belt. It was just like, wow, okay. So that karate stuff was cool to get to the belt, but couldn't really help keep it. It was crazy. Yeah. I remember being young and seeing that fighting style and was like, oh my gosh, this is the next wave, This is the new era. That's what it looked like then.
Yeah, it must have been a really exciting time to be kind of watching it unfold, but also just so shocking to see how quickly it kind of came and went. It was like a flash in the pan type moment. Shogun Hua would also never defend his belt because his reign only lasted 315 days. He would run into a very, very prominent figure in the UFC. Jon Jones.
This is where the belt stays in one place for a while.
Well, let's set the scene a little bit. Jon Jones, coming in here, was the youngest, still to this day, the youngest champion in UFC history. So he beats Ryan Bader, another young prospect at the time, via submission in the second round, completely dominated him. after, and I believe Shogun was supposed to defend his belt against somebody, and I don't remember if it might have been Rashad Evans, it might have been Rampage Jackson. I don't remember who he was supposed to defend against, but they were out of the fight. So the Bader fight for Jones happens at UFC 126, February 2011. February 5th, 2011. After winning the fight in the octagon, they ask if he wants to be the replacement opponent at UFC 128, which happened March 19th.
Crazy.
A month and 2 weeks later. He accepts, and he goes in and puts on one of the best title fight performances you'll ever see. Absolutely pulverizes Shogun Rua, who is an exceptional striker.
A literal legend of MMA getting dismantled by, at the time, what was he, 23 when he became the champion? Just unreal
I think he was 20.
He may have been 22
or
going
23,
on 23.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally around our age now.
Yeah, crazy. Are we UFC champion?
No. No, we are not. And I don't know how many people thought that Jones was going to win going in. I don't know. I don't remember. I wasn't watching at that time. Do you remember kind of what?
At that time it was still there were so many unknowns it seemed about Jon. You knew, okay, we've got this up and coming stud that's been wrecking everyone, but there still wasn't too much hype compared to some of these other guys that were coming in. And then all of a sudden he beats Shogun and just absolutely dismantles him. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, you got to think at that time people might go, this might be pushing him too soon.
Yeah.
A win over Ryan Bader, who Ryan Bader, another young prospect, and you're like, you get a title fight against Shogun Rua, but he passes the test, and
passed every other test. After.
I don't know if it's even. Is it worth mentioning that he did have the longest title reign up until this point, and also had the most title defenses?
Yeah,
still to this day, the most title defenses in light heavyweight history. 1,501 days.
Crazy.
8 title defenses.
Consecutive. Before the... Okay, yeah.
So I got my work cut out for me here. Let's...
Let him know. The greatness that we witnessed.
He beat Rampage Jackson at UFC 135. Lyoto Machida at UFC 140.
That was a brutal one.
Rashad Evans at UFC 145. Vitor Belfort. Now this was... Super Vitor at that time.
Yeah.
At UFC 152. Chael Sonnen at UFC 159. Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 165.
Still one of the greatest fights ever.
Glover Teixeira at UFC 172. And Daniel Cormier at UFC 182. And then this is kind of where we get into a little bit of Jon Jones's
he beat himself for the belt.
Extracurricular activities. Jones would be stripped of the title on April 28, 2015 due to his involvement and arrest in a felony hit and run. That hit and run being a woman who was pregnant.
Yeah.
You kind of said it best. Jones really did.
He beat himself.
For the belt, nobody could beat Jones besides Matt Hamill, of course.
Yeah, that's true.
However, it just seemed like even to this day, it seems like the only thing... guy that can beat Jon Jones is Jon Jones himself.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So with that, you have a vacant title. So someone's got to... We need a new champion. Because Jones, I believe, was... I don't know if he would be... he was arrested, but he was suspended, I believe.
Yeah, he was just in a lot of deep...
Because then he got caught... I believe USADA...
Yeah.
He popped for cocaine, I believe, around this time. And it's hard to even remember, the timeline for him. However, this is where Daniel Cormier finally gets his first reign with the belt. He would beat Anthony Rumble Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
A great fight there at UFC 187 on May 23rd, 2015.
Now we have a new champion after the longest reign that there has been.
And honestly, Daniel's reign would be almost as long as Jon's.
Yeah.
It was 1,315 days, but he had 5 less title defenses. Only defended the belt 3 times.
Yeah, a lot of craziness, and of course we'll get into it.
So he would defend against Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 192.
Another great fight. Gustafsson brings it, man.
Then he would not defend the belt again until Anthony Johnson at UFC 210. And then Volkan Oezdemir at UFC 220.
Yeah, definitely his most flawless title.
So they technically counted as all one title reign. there's a lot of
There's
history
something
in between there.
before that Vulcan fight.
So we'll start with they were planning to do a rematch between Cormier and Jones after Cormier beat Gustafsson, essentially.
Yeah.
So then Jon Jones and him are set to headline UFC 197. Oh shit, Daniel Cormier's out with injury.
Yeah.
So then Ovince St. Preux steps in, an interim title is introduced, Jon Jones wins easily.
Dominates to a decision.
Yeah, Jon Jones, interim champ. So now the rematch is set for UFC 200.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I remember getting so excited for that. That was literally a month after I started watching, but I knew who these two guys were.
Yeah, what could have been with that card.
The day before the event, USADA announced that Jon Jones had popped for PEDs.
Man, and I remember that video of Dana telling DC backstage, and he kicks the ground and just gets so upset. Brutal stuff, man. The UFC 200, a card that could have been absolutely just incredible, really fell through.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, that's where we kind of see, okay, the fight falls through again. What do we do next? And DC ends up taking a fight against, Anderson Silva on like 27 hours notice. Anderson Silva weighs in at 193 pounds. DC does what he has to do to win, but of course that's not a title fight. It was just a really awkward 3-round fight that got tossed onto the main card. We don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, it's just it shouldn't have even happened, honestly. Because of this, Jones would be stripped of the interim title on November 9th, 2016. Then UFC 214 happens.
Yes.
So
finally get to see the rematch.
defends against Anthony Johnson at 210. Then you have the rematch set again. Jones coming back from the suspension. Rematch is set. A great fight. Cormier looked great early.
Mm-hmm.
Jones lands an amazing
Brutal.
head kick.
Nasty.
And you see Cormier like lean into one side. Like you can tell he's not in good way. Jones finishing it off with some ground and pound.
What round did that come in?
Third round.
Okay.
So Jon Jones and new champion.
Everything's kind of back to normal, quote unquote.
Except it isn't, because literally, so he would win the belt on July 29th. But he would be stripped on September 13th after his win was overturned to a no contest due
post-fight test.
A failed pre-fight.
Oh, it was pre-fight.
And post-fight, I believe.
Yeah. The Pico Greens.
Yeah. Cormier was then retroactively reinstated as champion.
Yes.
So a very weird time, right?
Yeah, and DC likes to talk about this time where, I lost to Jon. He didn't like just getting the belt handed to him, and he kind of looked at that upcoming fight we're about to speak of with Vulcan as his shot at a vacant belt. So he doesn't view it as a defense, even though it technically is.
Right. So then you have the Vulcan Oezdemir fight. Vulcan, a guy who would knock out everybody.
No time. He was knocking everybody out in seconds.
And Cormier made pretty easy work of him.
Yeah.
I think, though, this time period with Jones, even though I know Cormier wanted to fight Vulcan to show that, okay, I'm winning the belt here in his mind, I think this is where, in his mind, he probably first decided he wanted to go to heavyweight.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think there was just, in his mind, you got to think, there's no way I can have the legacy I want at this point.
I'm just always going to be under Jon's shadow.
And it's and Jon can't seem to outlast himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Cormier can't really get the win back. He's already lost technically twice, even if one got overturned. It was too messy.
Yeah.
So I think this is where the groundwork was made for him to make the move to heavyweight.
And it just so happens that same night he fights Vulcan, Stipe defends his belt again.
Yep, against Francis Ngannou. They would end up having a super fight.
Yep.
UFC 226, where Cormier, while being light heavyweight champion, went up to heavyweight and would knock out Stipe, the heavyweight champion, in the first round.
Made history.
Yep.
We don't like to talk about that loss, though, but,
yeah.
So
after winning the belt, Cormier would vacate the title on December 28th, 2018. 174 days after winning the heavyweight title.
And now the belt is up for grabs once more.
The belt is up for grabs again. And guess who just so happens to be coming back?
Johnny Bones.
Jon Jones coming back.
The boogeyman, huh?
Seriously, man. When you're really, doing this, it's so hard to keep up with all the stuff the guy's done.
Keeping up with the Joneses. Literally,
And he's coming back, and they decide they want to run a rematch with him and Alexander Gustafsson.
I was so excited.
First one of the best fights in UFC history. A razor-thin close fight.
And I thought we were going to get the same thing. I picked Gus to win the second fight.
You thought Gus won the first one.
Well, I thought Gus won the first one, and I said he was going to win the second one.
See, I was in the other camp. I thought Jones won the first one, and I thought he was going to win this.
You were correct.
I was.
John did not let it happen again.
But there was a bumpy road to get even to this fight. So scheduled UFC 232 was supposed to be in Las Vegas.
I forgot about this.
So where do we...
So John wasn't allowed to fight in Vegas
because basically what happened is USADA, on one of Jon Jones' pre-fight samples, had found traces of PEDs again.
Yeah. This time it's the picograms. Yeah,
so
not the first.
Somehow it ends up turning out that it was a pulsating effect in Jon Jones'
the old
body
stuff.
From the 214 debacle. So it looked like, so I guess they were able to determine that he had not re-ingested PEDs, but this was simply leftover.
Yeah, they said it wouldn't affect his performance. They said it compared to throwing 1 grain of salt into an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Well, that's what John said, but it was more like 50 grams of salt. So still...
Do with that what you may.
However, a lot of fans not happy about this because... And you can't blame them. I mean, the UFC essentially overnight moved the entire event on like a week or 2 weeks notice to Inglewood, California.
Yeah.
I mean...
all those people that had tickets.
I mean, think about Vegas. The fighters' families. There was a lot shooken up. This was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
You know, you have an entire stadium.
They moved a whole show.
For Jon Jones.
For Jon Jones.
I mean, it's
for popping dirty, you know?
It's kind of wild, you know?
It is.
And, you know, the UFC, Dana, John, and then who is the gentleman that works for USADA?
Oh, Jeff Nowitzki?
Jeff Nowitzki. This was kind of the first time you would see him.
He became a character then.
Yeah, so the three of them would really go on like a press run.
Yeah, they did, though.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Nowitzki was on Joe Rogan's podcast. That's still, I believe, to this day, the most disliked episode of Joe Rogan's podcast. It was not a great time for the UFC publicly, if you want to, off that incident. I mean... Then you got they did like the pre-fight press conference, and a lot of the questions involved PEDs.
Yeah.
I remember the woman reporter.
Oh,
it was a really funny.
It got real uncomfortable.
It was really funny though when she asked a question regarding PEDs. Jon Jones said like, "No, we need better questions, and she said something. He goes, "Sit down," and she goes, "I am sitting down."
Yeah.
So. Some humorous moments, but overall it's just a headache.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the fight doesn't really live up to what it should be. Jon Jones kind of just
dominated that one.
Gus just looked a little
flat.
Yeah, a little flat.
Got taken down, had no answers.
Yep. Jones would go on to hold the belt for 597.
Yeah, it becomes a little normal for a little while anyway.
So 597 days. Overall, across both his title reigns, he's held the belt for 2,098
days. 11 total defenses.
So during this reign, he would defend against Anthony Smith at UFC 235, which I want to let you talk about that one because...
Yeah, so it kind of just relates to what we just saw at UFC 259 over the weekend because John landed a very brutal illegal knee on Anthony Smith in that fight. But Anthony, being the lion heart, you know, that he is, chose to continue fighting. If he would have said he couldn't continue, he becomes part of the state of the UFC light heavyweight division as one of the champions on the list. Instead, chooses to fight on, gets dominated for 5 rounds. But that's when everybody kind of fell in love with Anthony for the heart that he has.
For a short period of time before people decided they didn't like him anymore. I don't know
we still don't know what happened there.
Then he would defend.
He would go on a 2-fight losing streak.
He would go on to lose the belt twice.
Yes, yeah.
Except for the judges didn't think so.
Right.
First is that fight with Thiago Santos.
Man, what a war.
I'm still
on one leg.
Yeah. UFC 239. It's an awesome fight. Very underrated, I think.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that by the end of the first round, Thiago's fighting on one leg.
Yep. ACL, PCL, MCL, all the L's. Torn. Shattered in his knee. And goes 5 rounds with one of the greatest
And we
ever.
thought he won.
And we thought he won. Yeah.
But judges scored a split decision. So
Yeah.
2 of the 3 judges there scored for Jones. And then he would defend against Dominic Reyes at
Undefeated.
UFC 247.
Undefeated stud at the time. A lot of hype around Dom.
But I think nobody really thought he had a chance here.
No,
even coming off the Thiago fight, I still was like,
it was Jon Jones.
Winning this
Yeah.
fight.
Dom was just this freak athlete, played college football, matched the size of Jon in terms of length. Well, no one in terms of reach.
I'll say for me, what didn't help was that Dominic Reyes' probably biggest win at light heavyweight at that point was Volkan Oezdemir.
Yeah, he had an odd run to get to the title.
And that Volkan Oezdemir fight was so... I didn't think he won
controversial,
that fight.
yeah.
And also, it just wasn't a great fight. And I don't think... Volkan Oezdemir had kind of lost his shine at that point.
Yeah.
After the DC performance. I don't
Yeah.
think... Like, the fact that it was so close with Volkan, I think most people were like, okay... How much of a shot does Dominic Reyes
I
really
think
have?
the undefeated record played a big factor in him getting that title fight, you know?
Yeah,
giving
and
Jon
probably
an
his length,
undefeated
too.
guy.
Just
yeah.
kind of like how Gus got it for their first fight.
Yeah.
Like, he got it on his reach, his
That's a good way
size,
to put
and
it.
the fact that he was undefeated.
And much like Gus in that first fight, Dominic Reyes gives
I
Jon
think
hell.
out of the 3 times that Jon Jones' wins have been disputed, first Gus fight, Santos Reyes, I think this is the one that's most clearly
Yeah,
a loss.
I agree.
I think it's a clear 3-2 for Reyes, no matter what way you split it. But it was still a really close fight. But all 3 judges give it to Jon Jones.
Yeah, it was unanimous. Crazy that was unanimous with the one against Thiago was a split, huh?
I know.
Wild stuff.
That would happen at UFC 247. That was February 2020. That's, to this day, the last pay-per-view we've had with a full crowd.
Yeah, and with Jon Jones.
Well, yeah, because then, really, after this, Jon decides he's going to move to heavyweight. So on August 17, 2020, this is a week after we started this podcast.
Yes, sir.
So we probably talked about
We probably
this
talked
on
about
the
it on
podcast.
our very first news segment.
Yeah, Jones vacates the belt, citing issues with the UFC over salary negotiation and the desire to compete at heavyweight.
Yep.
And here we are with Jan Blachowicz.
The Polish powerhouse himself.
And we've talked about these, but at UFC 253, he would be placed in a title fight with Dominic Reyes.
Yep.
Me and you, a lot of others.
Many thought, oh, well, Dom
This is Dom's crowning
technically
moment.
beat Jon. He's the uncrowned champ already.
Jan had a nice run, but it's like, okay, this is Dominic's crowning moment.
Yeah. Like a lot of people.
And he gets battered.
Busted up. You ever seen a footprint in someone's body?
With one body kick?
Yeah. And then the Polish power in round 2. Yeah. Oh, baby.
Yeah.
So the left hook out of nowhere. Woo.
And as of now, Bolhovich has 1 title defense, and that was over Israel Adesanya on Saturday.
Yeah, UFC 259.
So up to this point, he is 163 days.
How about it?
Whew. Okay.
There it is.
So that's
what
your
history lesson.
That's what's led us to this point. Now I think it's kind of time to talk about the current state. And where we go from here. So let's start with... we got our champion, Jan Blachowicz. We got a couple of big fights coming up.
The elephant in the room here, though. Glover Teixeira.
Yeah, talk about Glover.
Glover Teixeira now on a 5-fight win streak at 41, 42 years old. The ageless wonder is what I've dubbed Glover, rightfully so. Is next in line. It's it's obvious. Dana White said it. Jan Blachowicz said it. And Jan said he needs 6 months, and then he'll be ready. So he said if Glover can wait 6 months, we'll get the job done. I'm assuming Glover will, because damn, the poor guy even weighed in as a backup at UFC 259. He's ready. It sucks he has to wait that long, or might have to, but he deserves the title, and that's definitely is what should be next. But there are some fun prospects coming up in this division right now. There really are. We saw one of them compete at UFC 259 in Alexander Rakic.
Yeah, we did. And yeah, I mean, the Jan Blachowicz and Glover Teixeira, they're on a crash course going right for one another, man. I mean, they're...
I'm really intrigued and think that's going to be a fun fight. Two guys that you would have never thought to be champion. Glover, of course, challenged for the belt years ago against Jon, as we talked about. Came up short. Had his fair share of wins and losses, traded back and forth. And now 5 in a row at 40-plus years old. Jan Bolhovich becomes the champion after starting 2-4 in the UFC. Now he's 38 years old. Just beat an undefeated Israel Adesanya. What a feel-good story this fight will be.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because these are two guys that I've counted out every step of the way and that the majority...
You're not the only one, yeah.
I mean, with Glover, I really thought... Really, the finishing, kind of the nail in the coffin for me, where I was out on Glover Teixeira really being in the title picture again, was all the way back at UFC 202.
Yeah.
When he got one punch KO'd by Anthony Johnson. I said, okay, Glover needs to
That was nasty.
I mean, we have not seen Glover fight for a belt since UFC 172 against Jon Jones.
Years.
And now, here in the next 6 months, we might see him.
It's going to be in the 260s when he fights next,
That's
Almost 100 pay-per-views
later.
later.
I'd like to look that up and see what the longest gap in
between two challenging title
appearances.
2 title challenges. Yeah.
Because I bet he has the record.
Got to be, man. Oh, so many people, get 2 title challenges.
And the fact that it happens so far apart, you never see that.
Yeah.
And for all we know, that could be... I mean, this could be like Glover's Dan Henderson.
This could be a swan song.
Yeah, it's like the Dan Henderson when he got that title fight against Bisping.
Which we thought he won.
Well, I don't think I did. But
anyway, story for another state of.
Yeah, so that's definitely the fight. This Israel fight was fun. But now it's like, okay, we got some clarity. We got some direction.
But let's do a light heavyweight.
Maybe this is a hot take, but I think overall, and I could have been wrong. I mean, maybe Israel would have defended the belt at light heavyweight a few times and stayed active like he's done.
This is better for the division.
I think it might be better for the division. Because there's a lot. Israel could do so much, and that's great. But if he's holding the belt at light heavyweight, I feel like he would have been just like waiting for that Jones fight. Mm-hmm. Potentially, he is a guy that likes to stay active, and I won't take that away from him, and I love that about him.
Man, but regardless, like we've seen with Amanda, when you are defending back and forth, you're going to have a lull between one of the divisions. Because when you defend light heavyweight, you're more than likely going to do middleweight next. So then there's this long string of at minimum 6 months, where there's no title fight in your division. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where in this case, it's just better that it stays with the actual light heavyweight, I guess.
So we have our title picture set. We know what the next fight's going to be for the belt. At least that's what it looks like. Let's talk about some of these, just the state of the division as a whole right now. What are your thoughts on the division? I know we did do an episode on the light heavyweight division. That was the first of our Who's Next series.
Yeah.
But that was a while back. So what's your opinion on the state of the division
I think
now?
as a top to bottom, it's in one of the strongest points it's been at in years.
If you want to go by parity's sake, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where you truly, like, Jan Bolhovich is awesome. He's a great champion. But he doesn't feel like he's going to be necessarily like a guy that's going to hold the belt for 5 years. It feels like...
Could he? Shit, maybe. But I
get
what you're saying.
I'm just saying, like, it feels like we're in a good spot where Jan Bolhovich is really fun right now, and he might hold the belt for a
couple times.
I mean, until he retires, maybe.
Yeah.
But he doesn't feel like he's so much better than his competition to where they don't have a chance.
You're anticipating competitive fights.
So it makes each title defense for him intriguing.
Exactly.
That's what starts with Glover Teixeira, but then after that, you got these big matchups set. I mean, Alexander Rakic... If the Teixeira fight never comes to be, or if Teixeira gets hurt, he's right there ready to go.
He could be in that backup situation.
I bet he will be.
Yeah.
And he deserves it.
Then you've got guys like Jiri Prochazka, who you're huge on.
Yeah.
We've got guys like Magomed Ankalaev making their way up the ladder. Look down to number 12, Jimmy Crute, the number 1 ranked top 25 prospect under 25 for ESPN MMA.
Number 15, Jamal Hill.
Crazy. For undefeated stud in Jamal Hill. Top to bottom, the most fun, most just so many questions throughout the whole division that we've seen in many, many years, and that's a great thing.
Really, since that time when there was being hot potatoes.
Yeah, it's very refreshing. Not that it's bad to see a dominant champion.
No.
But after you've seen it for so long, it's nice to see something different. And you get to see so many different matchups and styles, and Just so many great things.
I mean, before Jan Blachowicz, this is a stat you had told me.
Yeah, we love this.
We had not had a champion for light heavyweight that wasn't named Jon Jones or Daniel Cormier in a decade.
Essentially 10 years. Damn near.
It's
crazy.
Literal madness.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And now, neither one of them are involved in this division.
Mm-hmm.
So the door is just wide open for one of these guys to really make a name for himself. You got Dominic Reyes fighting Yuri Prochazka. You got... What even are some of these matchups? I mean...
Yeah, there's a lot of international
because we just saw Rakic beat Thiago Santos. So
yeah.
Then you got Anthony Smith, who I believe is fighting Jimmy Crute, ain't he?
Yeah. He took that... I think it's in May, I believe. Because Jimmy's opponent fell through. Ryan Span's fighting Misha Cirkunov this weekend.
Yeah.
We're going to preview that fight. Jamal Hill's lined up. Paul Craig has been a beast and a real threat to anybody in that division.
In his last fight.
That dude is nasty on the ground. There's just so many great fighters here. Johnny Walker's still trying to make a name for himself, coming off of a win in the craziest one-round fight I've ever seen in my life against Ryan Spann. You still have guys like Volkan, who was challenged for a belt before. Guys like Nikita Krylov, who is always hanging around, but with 2 wins, could finally make it to that contender status. Yeah. It's so fresh right now. And even guys like Thiago, who could still make their way there
Thiago,
again.
technically on a 3-fight skid, but he's still ranked 4th in the division.
Exactly.
And that's because he's not been getting dominated in these fights. I mean, we thought he beat Jon Jones. He looked great early against Glover and then slowed down dramatically. And then he just kind of got outpointed by Rakic in a relatively close fight, but a fight Rakic clearly won.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The division's in a great state.
Yep.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I just want to highlight some of these other guys. I mean, these guys we've mentioned, but, when you're talking about prospects, Jimmy Crute, Jamal Hill, and I'll throw in Muhammed Ankalaev.
They're 3 of the biggest in the whole UFC, and they're all in one division.
Yeah, and Ankalaev's just made a splash into the top 10 with a win over Nikita Krylov.
Yeah.
Not a very exciting fight, but a fight that showed a lot about Ankalaev's ability. A guy who's he looks like an animal on the feet. Mm-hmm. But then he kind of just suffocated Krylov for 3 rounds on the ground.
Yeah. And what we called for him and Santos next, right? If I'm not mistaken. Is that what we said?
Oh, we might have.
I think we did. Either way, he's getting the top 5 next.
Yeah, and that would be he's
going to be the first up of those prospects to really get thrown into deep water. Now that you
said that, give me that. Yeah. I don't remember if we said that or not.
If we didn't say it, here we are now saying it.
Yeah, I mean, Ankalaev, he looks like he's ready to make a splash to the top 5. Jimmy Crute's got a big test with Anthony Smith. I mean, Anthony Smith's even trying to hang around.
Exactly.
Anthony Smith now works for the UFC and commentating he does
up in the booth, pre-fight, post-fight.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. He's really at this point one of the biggest names in the light heavyweight division.
That's
so
true.
He gets a win. I mean, they have him headline damn near every fight, one a fight night a month.
The king of fight night headliners.
Yeah,
he's literally had 5-6 in a row.
I know, it's crazy. And he could very well, with the win over Johnny Walker, they could give him a title shot if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And I mean, he would be competitive, I think, against any of these guys in the top 5.
It's true.
Besides maybe Rakic. But it's literally, no matter who you pair up in this division.
I think there's a lot of great matchups, stylistically.
Guys like Jamal Hill, Paul Craig, Jimmy Crute, even Ryan Spann, Johnny Walker. Some of these guys down at that 10 through 15.
They're all dangerous.
I think they would all hold up well against these guys like Thiago Santos, Yuri Prochazka, Anthony Smith.
Even Jan,
yeah. I mean, I really think that you have a 1 through 15, but this feels like the division where everybody's so close.
Yeah, a bunch of sharks, you know?
And that's so exciting.
Yeah.
It might not be as talented as lightweight or as men's bantamweight.
Yeah.
However, for parity's sake.
For a division that's been stale.
Really, you could pair up Glover Teixeira, who's number 1, against number 15, Jamal Hill.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be so sure who would win that.
Couldn't tell you.
And that's not a knock on Glover.
No.
That's just a credit to Jamal Hill and to this whole division.
Exactly.
You really can't.
It's a new wave, a new era.
Now, let me pose another question to you.
Mm-hmm.
So now we got Jon Jones at heavyweight.
Yeah.
Israel Adesanya looks like he's going to go back to middleweight. Where do you think these two guys' places are now in terms of the light heavyweight division? Will we see them again compete there? Will they fight at light heavyweight?
I don't think we'll ever see Jon there again. He's so damn big right now, and he's just works very hard to put on a lot of muscle and weight. I think he's solely focused on heavyweight and a new challenge. Izzy, I do believe we see him there again in the future, but it'll come a time after multiple more title defenses at 185 and at a time where he actually builds his body into the weight class.
Yeah.
Not just kind of, I'm just not going to cut weight and I'll therefore make weight. You know what I mean? He's going to have, because I think he's going to want to chase champ status, and he very well can. He's got the skills to do so. There's a couple levels that he still needs to get to. That's all.
Okay. No, I definitely think I agree with you. I don't think we'll see Jon Jones compete at light heavyweight again. I think that guy is really... I've actually been really impressed by his commitment to making that jump to heavyweight.
And I'm so intrigued, because a lot of people have wanted to see that for years. Yeah. And now we finally are going to get to see it soon. Granted, it might come against our favorite fighter, which could be, hurtful, which we'll wait until that day to talk about it. But I'm just very excited for what Jon can do at heavyweight, for what's going on at light heavyweight, and then, of course, Izzy, one of the most popular people in the UFC right now.
Yeah, and I agree with Izzy. I think he's going to go back.
Go back to the drawing board.
Continue to try to defend that middleweight belt. We'll see if he's able to do so.
We're talking about a guy that could potentially chase down Anderson Silva's records at middleweight, That's how good he's looked at times.
Yeah, I mean, he really does look like he's just a level above his competition. I mean, right now, the biggest matches for him at middleweight
are all rematches.
Are mostly rematches.
Yeah.
And one or two more against guys who he hasn't fought before, and that's completely cleared out the top six,
you talk about a guy that's cleared it out, man. He's done it.
Because, I mean, the road to get there for him, I mean, we're not talking about middleweight, but it's just crazy kind of what he's done there. But you saw when he went up to light heavyweight, he just didn't quite look like the same fighter.
Yeah. It looked like
and
Max
honestly,
when he fought at lightweight.
Well, I shouldn't say... he didn't even look bad. Like, he looked good.
No.
It's just... It looked like some of the things he was doing that would have hurt guys at middleweight, that would have gotten in their head. The Izzy effect, as you've kind of coined. Jan Bolhovich was all business.
And when he got taken down, Jan too big, too strong, too powerful.
And Izzy trying to kind of power out of those bottom positions and just not able to do so.
A guy that we had seen have incredible takedown defense before, all of a sudden gets taken down with ease by Jan 3 out of 3 times. Two of them which won the fight.
Now here's another question I'll pose. So, Bellator has made a lot of strides in improving their...
Shit, that's a whole other episode. I didn't think about their division.
In their light heavyweight division.
Man.
Now Anthony Johnson's over there.
The Grand Prix, Yoel Romero, Corey Anderson.
Yoel Romero, their champion over there. Where do you think they are in terms of competing with the UFC head-to-head at light heavyweight?
I think they have a lot of great talent. The difference there being... Now, granted, there are plenty of veterans throughout this top 15 at UFC Light Heavyweight. Essentially all 8 of those dudes outside of the champion are seasoned vets that have kind of been in the UFC or just been around the block, and now they're finishing their career in Bellator. Whereas the UFC is still very fresh. Again, like I said, there are veterans, but a plenty of fresh blood with those prospects we've mentioned. So I think they're both great, and I don't like when people are like, oh, well, Bellator's definitely got the better light heavyweight division. Just... let Bellator enjoy this amazing time that they're about to have, and let the UFC do their shit in the light heavyweight division.
I mean, you got Vadim Nemkov as the champion. You got Ryan Bader was still very competitive in the UFC when he went over there.
Nemkov's a killer.
Phil Davis, Lyoto Machida's fighting there, Melvin Manhoff. I mean, they have a lot of guys, and I don't really care whether it's more talented or less talented.
If anything, it's just better for the sport.
Oh, by
far.
What I mean? By far.
I can't wait to watch that.
I guess what I should have asked instead was more those guys that left recently, Corey Anderson and
Yoel
Anthony. Yoel Romero didn't compete at light heavyweight UFC, but I guess Rumble Johnson, and then I guess the idea that Yoel Romero could have fought at light heavyweight in UFC. How much do you feel like that's been missed up to this? Like, do you feel like the UFC's light heavyweight division is missing anything by not having these guys there?
No. I don't think so. I think there's just so much parity and freshness in the division now. They could care less. But I'll fire back with one question.
Okay.
say Corey Anderson, say Anthony Johnson were still in the UFC in this current light heavyweight division, how do they fare out? Again, it could be all matchup based, but we've seen both of those guys when they get to that highest point, that biggest moment in the UFC, they fell shy. Now, of course, for Johnson, he made it to the title.
Let's look at it like this: Corey Anderson was in a title eliminator
with Jan. Yeah,
got knocked out first round. I would have assumed he would have fought by this point in UFC again. I don't know who it would have been against, or because it is all matchup based. But I do think Corey Anderson would still be
competitive.
Bubble 5, 6, 7 in that range. That's where he's kind of been since he joined. He's really been kind of a sort of gatekeeper, a guy that couldn't quite get over the hump.
It's like we're seeing with a guy like Nikita Krylov.
Yeah, or he could give a guy a hard fight any given night. He could win any given night, but he could lose any given night as well, which I know is kind of true for anybody. But
and it's a harder question when you think about Anthony. But man, when he was in the UFC, he was such a killer.
See, that would be something to answer, I guess, after we see how he does, how he fares in the Grand Prix. However, if I had to guess, I think they would have reinserted him into essentially a win one fight and then you're in a title fight.
Yeah, I agree.
So, now what would have made sense if they hadn't brought him back yet would to pair him up with Thiago Santos.
That's the fight I wanted.
Because Thiago, 3-fight skid.
Yeah.
Anthony Johnson hasn't fought in 4 years at this point. I mean, that matchup would have made a lot of sense.
That's just a banger, man. And, I would ask about Yoel, but we haven't seen him there yet, so I'll hold off until we see him next month.
I mean, if I had to guess with Yoel, too, I think he would have a similar... It would be interesting if, Corey Anderson being gone, I don't think necessarily takes away too much. However, it would have been really fun.
That would have been refreshing
if you had Rumble Johnson come back and then Yoel moves up. It could have been really fun to see those guys kind of infiltrate light heavyweight and see how they fared. Those two old dogs, and you got a lot of these young guys at light heavyweight.
And all the title fights that Yoel gets, he could have came up, won a fight, and have fought for a title at 205.
Oh, he definitely could have. UFC have shown that they will give him title fights. He's had a few.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I think the light heavyweight division's in a great place right now, and I think with Jan winning, it puts it in a better place.
I think it's just going to keep getting better. We're going to keep getting better.
Yeah, so I guess that is the end.
The state of
the UFC light heavyweight division. Leave us your thoughts,
of course,
on the division as a whole by leaving a voice message.
Well, let's pose the question to them.
Okay.
Is the division in a better state with Jan defending and being still, or do you think it's more exciting and better for the division had Izzy won at UFC 259?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, so leave us your thoughts with a voice message, and we'll plug those links now. Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter and Instagram at DSalee14. Be on the lookout, by the way. Got my preview article coming out this week with Overtime Heroics. We're going to be breaking down Misha Serkinov and Ryan Spann, and, of course, break it all down again on Friday. But, no, I'll get into that. And you can find our podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
Yeah, be on the lookout Friday. We have a preview coming to you for UFC Fight Night, headlined.
I love this fight night.
By Leon Edwards versus Blau Muhammed.
Oh my!
I believe for Blau it's his first time headlining.
Yep.
Leon's headlined I think once or twice before, but
6-fight main card. Serkinov Spann co-main event. Angela Hill, Ashley Yoder's going to be on the card. A lot of great fights to look out for. Can't wait for it.
Yeah, I mean, even Eric Anders, Darren Stewart, Dan Ige, Gavin Tucker.
That's the freaking fight of the night.
Manel Cape versus Matthias Nicolau. That could be a really fun fight. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this card. It sucks that Hamza is kind of...
Yeah.
And really, we could have probably talked about him even for light heavyweight. That guy seems to be wanting to go everywhere.
That's true.
But it sucks that he's kind of out of the picture for the time being. But you do have to kind of feel good for Blau getting that opportunity,
Yeah, 100%.
As for me, if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram at @ntbaker_, you'll be taken to our link tree, which gives you the links to all the platforms that the podcast is on, along with the social media platforms. That includes the Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. It's all on there, baby. And there's a couple links for the anchor page. First, leaving a voice message. If you have a thought about an upcoming fight, a fight that's already happened, a news story, if you want to say hi or tell us a piece of shit, you got 60 seconds to do so. And there's a link if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. That just provides with a few dollars a month, and all that money goes back into improving the quality of the podcast. Whether it be improving the audio equipment or down the line doing a video podcast. So again, you can find all that if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram at ntbaker_. But with that, we're out, and we'll see y'all on Friday.